My son-in-law announced to 50 guests at his firm's gala that I spent my retirement pushing a broom at the community center. What he didn't know was that I'd spent 31 years as a covert financial crimes investigator for the RCMP. 3 weeks later, the commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police walked into his law firm's anniversary dinner in downtown Toronto. She carried a formal commendation letter and a request for my signature on a national task force consultation agreement. My son-in-law watched the woman whose name appeared on every major fraud prosecution in Canada for the past decade shake my hand like I was an old friend, because I was. The disrespect didn't start at the gala. It started 4 years ago when my daughter Miriam married James Alderton. Miriam is everything I raised her to be. Methodical, honest, quietly brilliant. She finished her CPA designation at 26 and was managing forensic audits for a mid-sized firm in Mississauga by 30. I couldn't have been more proud. But James came from a different kind of family. His father was a Bay Street lawyer, retired old money Toronto. His mother chaired the board of a private school in Forest Hill, where the tuition cost more than my first house. The Alderton family had been producing barristers and partners for 2 generations. They had a box at the Rogers Centre and another one at the Four Seasons Centre for the Performing Arts. The first time James saw me, I was wearing a Toronto Maple Leaf sweatshirt that had seen better days, drinking Tim Hortons coffee out of a travel mug in Miriam's kitchen. He looked around the apartment, then at me, and something behind his eyes adjusted. "So you're retired now?" he asked. "A few years now," I said. "From government work?" I told him, which was true. He nodded the way you nod at someone's answer when you've already decided it doesn't matter. "Miriam mentioned you worked for the government." "Federal?" "Federal, yes." "Administration? Support services?" I looked at him over my coffee cup. "Something like that." He accepted that. He would keep accepting it for 4 years. "My name is Douglas Holt. I spent 31 years with the RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit, the last 14 as a senior investigator running long-term undercover operations targeting white-collar fraud, money laundering, and organized financial crime. I worked under civilian cover. I had business cards that said I was an insurance adjuster, a property assessor, a tax consultant. I attended fraudulent investment seminars and sat across kitchen tables from people who thought I was a mark. I helped dismantle 3 Ponzi schemes that had cost ordinary Canadians over $400 million combined. I received the Commissioner's Commendation twice. In 2009, I was part of a team that brought down a Vancouver-based money laundering network with ties to organized crime in 4 provinces. When I retired, my handler strongly suggested I maintain a low profile. There were people I'd helped put away who still had friends on the outside. So I moved to Oakville, volunteered 2 mornings a week at the Kerr Street Mission helping with their bookkeeping, and took a part-time position doing facilities maintenance at the Oakville Community Center, sweeping floors, fixing stuck doors, making sure the seniors' yoga class had enough chairs. Honest work. Work that asked nothing of me except showing up. James found out about the community center in my 3rd year with them. After that, Douglas pushes a broom for the city became his quiet shorthand for explaining me to people. Always delivered with that slight tilt of the head, that half smile, sympathetic. The way you describe a distant relative who never quite found his footing. At their wedding, he introduced me to his father this way. "This is Miriam's dad. He's been doing some volunteer work since he retired." His father shook my hand and immediately turned back to his champagne. At Christmas dinner the following year, James held court at the head of the table about a major tax fraud case his firm had been brought in to litigate. He was animated, expansive. I knew the defendant's name. I had sat across from him in a hotel lobby in Ottawa in 2011 wearing a wire. "The RCMP evidence was sloppy," James said, cutting his turkey. Honestly, the investigators who built that file had no understanding of how corporate structures actually work. Classic government incompetence. My wife June touched my hand under the table. "Not yet." "I know. The accountant who blew the whistle," I said mildly. "Did she ever get her settlement?" James looked at me. "How do you know about the whistleblower?" "It was in the news," I said. Which was also true. He accepted that too. The moment everything changed happened 6 weeks before his firm's 4th anniversary gala. James had been made junior partner, which in Alderton family terms was roughly equivalent to a coronation. His mother started planning the celebration immediately. The Omni King Edward Hotel, 60 guests, past canapes, a jazz trio. The Alderton family did not do backyard barbecues. Miriam called me on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice before she'd said 10 words. "Dad, James is asking whether you could sit with his parents' friends rather than at the head table." I set down the crossword I'd been working on. "He says the partners from his firm will be there, and he doesn't want the conversation to be awkward." Awkward how? Silence. Then, he said something about how explaining your background takes time, and he doesn't want to spend the evening managing it. I thought about that for a moment. "What did you say?" "I said you're my father and you sit at the family table, or I start making phone calls to cancel the venue deposit." "Good girl." "Dad." Her voice dropped. "Is there anything you want me to tell him? About your work? You've always been vague and I've never pushed. But some things have reasons behind them, sweetheart. I'll be at the head table. That's enough for now." She wasn't satisfied. I could tell. But she trusted me the way she always had, the way that made me prouder than any commendation. 3 days before the gala, strange things began happening. I was in the lobby of the King Edward for a venue walkthrough with Miriam when my phone buzzed. Not my personal phone, the other one, the one with the federal encryption profile that I'd kept active at the Bureau's request because cold case consultations came up more often than you'd think. I stepped away from the group. The caller ID showed a number I recognized immediately. "Doug, it's Carla, Commissioner Carla Fontaine, whom I'd worked with when she was a staff sergeant in Vancouver in 2008. We need you on something. Can you come in Thursday? I have a family event Thursday evening." "I know. This will be brief. And Doug, there may be some overlap you should know about." I didn't ask her to explain on an open line. "I'll be there at 10. James was watching me from across the lobby when I came back. He'd noticed the phone. He'd noticed my posture. I could see him cataloging it and coming up empty. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Scheduling thing," I said. "Community center rescheduled a session." He nodded. But he kept watching. The second strange thing happened the morning of the gala. 2 people, in plain clothes, approached me in the hotel corridor while I was picking up Miriam's corsage from the front desk. They had that specific quality of stillness that I recognized, the way a former musician recognizes perfect pitch. "Mr. Holt? Depends on who's asking." The woman showed me a credential wallet. "RCMP Integrated Financial Crime Unit. Commissioner Fontaine asked us to confirm your attendance this evening and go over some security considerations." James appeared at the end of the corridor. He watched the entire exchange. When the officers left, he came directly to me. "Doug, what was that?" "Due diligence," I said. "Government pension review. They send people in person now." "Those were plain clothes, RCMP. Are they?" "I don't know how to tell." I smiled pleasantly and went to find my wife. The third thing was the envelope. It arrived at the hotel concierge desk addressed to me, marked with the RCMP crest and the words, "Commissioner's Office, Ottawa." The concierge handed it to me in front of James, his parents, and 2 of the senior partners from James's firm. James stared at it. His mother stared at it. His father, the retired Bay Street lawyer, stared at it with an expression I recognized as professional wariness. "Government correspondence?" James's father asked. "Happens from time to time," I said, and put it in my jacket pocket. "Open it," James said. "It'll keep." James looked at his father, then back at me. The calculation behind his eyes had shifted into something close to alarm. That evening, the King Edward Ballroom was everything his mother had arranged. White linen, low candlelight, the jazz trio working through a Bill Evans set in the corner. 60 of Toronto's legal and financial community, partners and judges, and people whose names appeared in the Financial Post, filling the room with the particular noise of people who were accustomed to being listened to. I spotted faces I knew. A retired Superior Court judge who had presided over the sentencing in the 2009 Vancouver case. A senior partner at a Bay Street firm who had been our expert witness in a securities fraud prosecution in 2014. A woman near the bar, who I recognized as the current head of the RCMP's Ontario Financial Crimes Division, who had been a young constable when I mentored her in 2003. They all knew my name. None of them acknowledged me directly, because old habits. James spent the cocktail hour working the room, and I watched him realize slowly that something was wrong. People were looking at me, not rudely, quietly. The retired judge nodded when I walked past. The woman from Financial Crimes Division and I made brief eye contact, and I saw her decide to play it straight, which meant saying nothing. James caught that exchange. He caught the way the senior Bay Street partner paused when I passed him, started to say something, then stopped. He found me near the bar during the second hour. "How do you know Justice Brennan?" "We crossed paths a few times over the years," I said. "He looked at you like he knew you well." "I have a memorable face." "Doug." His voice had gone tight. "I'm trying to understand what's happening tonight." "You're not." He stopped, recalibrated. "You're not in some kind of legal trouble, are you?" "Because if there's something I should know before, I'm not in legal trouble, James." "Then why are RCMP officers verifying your attendance at my gala? Why is there an envelope from the commissioner's office? Why does a sitting Superior Court judge nod at you like an old colleague?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I think you should trust that I'm not going to embarrass your firm tonight." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." He walked away. I watched his jaw set from across the room. Dinner was served. At the head table, James's father asked me quiet, pointed questions about my government career, and I gave him quiet, partial answers, and I watched him become increasingly certain that the partial answers were covering something significant. James's mother beside him kept glancing at my jacket pocket where the envelope sat. When the time came for remarks, James stood up with the particular confidence of a man on his own stage. He thanked his partners, his staff, his family. He was polished. He was everything his family had built him to be. Then he looked at me. "I also want to acknowledge family who've joined us tonight. My wife Miriam, without whom none of this matters." Applause. Genuine. He smiled at her. Then, "And Miriam's father, Douglas, who I know makes the drive in from Oakville to support us whenever we ask." A pause. A slight smile. "Douglas has had a quieter life in retirement, but we're glad to have him here." Quieter life. I heard Miriam's breath catch beside me. I heard the retired judge clear his throat. I heard James's father set down his wine glass. "Douglas." James raised his glass. "To honest work in whatever form it takes." The applause was polite, confused. A few people near the back were looking at the floor. I stood up slowly. James looked surprised. He hadn't expected me to respond. I was the man who pushed a broom at the community center. Men like that didn't stand up at gala dinners. "May I?" I gestured toward the microphone. He couldn't say no without the whole room watching him say no. I took the microphone. I looked around the room, at Justice Brennan, at the woman from Financial Crimes, at the Bay Street partner, at James's parents, at Miriam, whose expression had gone very still and very watchful. "James is right that I've had a quiet retirement," I said. "I chose it deliberately. After 31 years of working cases that required me to be invisible, I was ready to be ordinary." I paused. "But I think tonight is the right time to be a little less invisible." I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the envelope. "This arrived today from Commissioner Fontaine's office." I opened it carefully and unfolded the letter. The RCMP crest was visible at the top. I heard the room go very quiet. I'll read the relevant portion. James had both hands flat on the table. "Senior Investigator Douglas Raymond Holt, Financial Crimes Unit, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, retired. You are hereby formally requested to serve as Senior Consultant to the National Task Force on Corporate Financial Fraud, effective immediately upon your acceptance. This appointment reflects your 31 years of distinguished service, including your leadership of Operation Clearwater. which resulted in the recovery of $240 million in fraudulent investment proceeds and the prosecution of 19 individuals on charges of fraud over $5,000 and money laundering. Your receipt of the Commissioner's Commendation in 2004 and 2011, and your role in the successful prosecution of I Stopped, looked at James. He was the color of the white tablecloths. I'll spare everyone the full list, I said, but I'll mention one file because it's relevant to this room tonight. I folded the letter and looked at his senior partner, who had gone very still. The Harrington Vance Securities Fraud Prosecution, 2014. The expert financial analysis that supported the Crown's case was built on surveillance records my team gathered during an 18-month undercover operation. I believe your firm litigated the civil recovery. I glanced at James. And I believe you did the preliminary file review when you were an articling student. James made a sound I'd never heard from him before. His senior partner stood up slowly. Ladies and gentlemen, I think many of us in this room owe Douglas Holt a conversation we didn't know we were overdue for. Justice Brennan spoke from his table. I've presided over 4 prosecutions built on evidence from Doug's unit. We were never formally introduced, but I've known his name for 15 years. The woman from Financial Crimes Division set down her wine and crossed the room. Inspector Holt. The task force appointment. We're hoping you'll accept. I'll let you know Monday, I told her. She shook my hand, and I heard James's mother make a small sound beside her husband. James's father leaned across the table toward his son. I didn't need to hear him to understand what he was saying. The retired Bay Street lawyer understood exactly what had just happened, what it meant, and what James had done. I'd put the microphone down and sat beside Miriam, who was crying quietly, the way she cried when she was neither sad nor hurt, but simply overwhelmed by something she hadn't had words for yet. "Dad," she whispered, "why didn't you ever tell me?" "I tried to protect you the same way I tried to protect everyone else," I said. "Some things are safer kept quiet." "Did you know this was going to happen tonight?" I thought about that honestly. I knew it was possible. The Commissioner's letter. That timing wasn't an accident. Carla Fontaine is a deliberate woman. She knew what was in that room. She did it on purpose. She gave me the choice, I said. I could have opened it in my hotel room and called her Monday. I chose to open it here. Miriam looked at James, who was sitting motionless, untouched champagne in front of him, while his senior partner spoke quietly in his ear. His parents were no longer looking at anyone. "He can't come back from this," she said. "It wasn't a question. That depends entirely on him." The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks with the particular slowness of consequences that can't be hurried. James's senior partner sent him a formal memo reassigning him to document review on a residential real estate file, effective immediately, not a firing. The Alderton name still meant something. But the trajectory that had been building, the junior partnership, the profile cases, the quiet grooming for something larger, it stopped. The firm could not put forward a lawyer whose judgment had become a cautionary story that 60 of Toronto's legal community had witnessed firsthand. Justice Brennan recused himself from a matter in which James's firm appeared, citing a conflict he declined to specify. 2 other members of the judiciary made similar decisions in the following month. James didn't know why. He knew why. His father called him, and whatever was said in that conversation, James did not share it with Miriam. She told me only that it lasted 40 minutes, and James came out of the bedroom looking like he'd aged 10 years. Miriam came to my house on a Saturday morning in early November, 6 weeks after the gala. I was in the backyard clearing leaves from the flagstone when she pushed through the gate, and I knew from the way she walked that she'd been thinking about what she wanted to say for a long time. "Dad." "Sit down, sweetheart." I pulled a patio chair out for her. She sat. Pulled her coat tight. It was the kind of gray Ontario morning that makes everything feel honest. "I want to leave him," she said. I set down the rake. "Not because of the gala. Not because of what happened to his career. Because—" She stopped, looked at her hands. "Because I kept waiting for him to come and find me after, to say he was sorry, not for embarrassing you, for what it said about him. About us. She looked up. He apologized to his partners. He apologized to his father. He apologized to his father. He sent a note to Commissioner Fontaine's office. A pause. He hasn't apologized to you. I was quiet for a moment. And he hasn't really apologized to me either, she said. Not for making me feel ashamed of my own father for 4 years. He keeps saying he was working with incomplete information, that if he'd known. Her voice caught. He keeps making it about what he didn't know. Not about what he chose to do with what he did know. Which was what? That you were a decent man who treated people with respect and never once looked down on anyone. He knew that. He saw it every time you came to our house. She pressed her lips together. He chose the other thing. I nodded slowly. You're not going to tell me to stay and give him a chance to be better? That's not my decision, I said. What would you tell me? I thought about it the way you think about things after 31 years of watching people decide who to be when they think no one important is watching. I'd tell you that character isn't what someone does when they know it matters, I said. It's what they do when they're certain it doesn't. James was certain I didn't matter. You saw who he was then. She was quiet for a long time, the way Miriam is quiet when she's not thinking anymore, but has already decided. Okay, she said finally. The divorce was filed in January. Clean, uncomplicated, the way Miriam did everything. James did not contest it. I think some part of him understood that contesting it would require standing up and arguing that he deserved more consideration than he'd shown anyone else. He left Toronto in the spring. I heard through Miriam that he was with a smaller firm in Ottawa. I wished him nothing bad. That's the honest truth. I wished him the chance to become someone his daughter would be proud of, if he ever had one. I accepted the commissioner's consulting appointment, 2 days a week at the Financial Crimes Office in Toronto, reviewing cold cases, consulting on investigative methodology, occasionally sitting in on training sessions for newer investigators. I found I was good at explaining the things that took me years to learn, the way you're always better at explaining something after you've survived it, rather than while you're in the middle of it. And I kept the community center job. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I drove out to Kerr Street, propped open the gym doors for the seniors' fitness class, checked the boiler, swept the lobby, put out the chairs. Bill, who ran the morning program, asked me once why I'd bothered. Doesn't the government consulting pay more? It pays considerably more, I said. Then why? I thought about it. Because the consulting work asks things of me that I know how to give. But this place asks only that I show up and pay attention. And there's something in that I'm still learning. What I said to Bill was simpler. Because the people here need the chairs, and I know where the chairs are. He laughed. Bill laughs at things that aren't exactly jokes, which is why I like him. Miriam is doing well. She took on a new client last fall, a mid-size manufacturing company in Hamilton that had been defrauded by a CFO over 7 years. She found the discrepancy in 3 weeks that their previous auditors had missed for 4 years. Methodical, honest, quietly brilliant. Just like I said, she brought someone to Christmas dinner, a history teacher from a school in Burlington, steady and a little quiet, who shook my hand at the door and looked me in the eye and asked how I took my coffee. When I told him, he went and got it. That was enough for me. My wife June asked me on New Year's Eve whether I had any regrets about the gala. We were sitting in the living room with the television on low and the snow coming down over the backyard, and she had the particular look she gets when she already knows the answer but wants to hear me say it, about opening the letter in that room instead of in my hotel room upstairs. About all of it, the 4 years, letting him think what he thought. I considered it genuinely. He thought what he chose to think, I said. I didn't create that. He showed Miriam who he was when the stakes felt low. That's not something I did. That's something he did. And the letter? Carla gave me a choice. I made it. You could have made it quietly. Told him privately. Gulled him privately. Given him a chance to change. I could have, I agreed. but 60 people in that room were going to spend the rest of the year citing James Alderton's judgment. His clients were going to trust him with important things. I thought they deserved to know what I knew. June was quiet for a moment. That sounds very official, she said. It was 31 years of habit, I admitted. Protecting people from things they don't know are coming. She leaned over and put her head on my shoulder the way she's done for 34 years. You could have just told him you were RCMP, she said. The first Christmas dinner. I know. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. Probably. But you didn't. No. She was quiet again. The snow kept coming down over the neighbor's cedar fence and the dormant garden and the flagstones I'd cleared in November. He didn't deserve the short version, I said finally. People like James, they understand consequences. They don't always understand the lesson unless they feel the whole weight of it. June made the small sound she makes when she doesn't entirely agree, but has decided not to argue. Miriam seems happy, she said. She is. The teacher seems decent. He asked how I took my coffee and then went and got it. That's my entire criteria. June laughed. It filled the room the way her laugh always has, which is to say completely. Outside, the snow kept coming. Inside, the television murmured the countdown to midnight. And somewhere across the city, Miriam was probably laughing too. And James Alderton was probably sitting with whatever version of himself he was still becoming. And the community center chairs were stacked neatly in the storage room, waiting for Tuesday morning. I'd earned exactly this. A house in Oakville. A wife who knew everything and stayed anyway. A daughter who understood, finally and completely, what her father had been doing all those quiet years. Some secrets are worth keeping, and some of them, when the moment is exactly right, are worth letting go.